So officially, first day of work. Hi everyone, I am Riyally. This is the first episode of the Riyally Podcast. Dance like nobody's watching. What does it mean to dance like nobody's watching, right? Like, I think it definitely resonates now more than ever in an era of reels and TikToks that are all about dance, and we celebrate dance in so many different ways now. So when they say dance like nobody's watching, we are a culture that is adapting that in a more massy way than ever before. So I think it's not just about dance like nobody's watching, it's also about, like right now, talk like nobody's listening. Or say, for example, maybe the nicer ones are probably eat, no one's watching. I think that's the easiest one for all of us. But going back to the topic, it comes back to being true to yourself in a way that is not defined by the reaction of others. We're also diabolically in a culture where even though dance and performance and putting yourself out there is celebrated, it's also a lot of noise around that. And sometimes with voice comes great perspective, and sometimes with more voices, the actual essence of it can be diluted. And the essence isn't necessarily the dance per se, that's more metaphorical for what you want to express. So in a world that's rapidly changing, and the essence of who we want to be, what we think we can do, and just being in the moment and being able to actually immerse in that essence of who we want to become. And I think sometimes who we want to become can be defined a lot better than who we are becoming. And that's where dance like nobody's watching comes back into the foray, right? We've become very good with our manifestation boards. We've become very good with our goal systems. We thrive and hustle. And I think that's great awareness that we have as a society, that we can be goal oriented, that we can achieve a lot more than perhaps was possible before, with a lot more awareness and a lot more resources and tools than ever before. So at a time where that progression is emerging, it's also about going back into the essence of, okay, how can we be more aware of who we are becoming in the moment? Because there's so many milestones to reach. There is some sort of an effect that takes over in many different ways, whether that's through psychology, through neuroscience, and through other social research that happens as well, in terms of when we're being viewed by people. So it's like an evolving piece of who you want to become in a world that will constantly have many different opinions, many different voices coming as well. And it's not just about opinions, it's also about inspiration. Like, the inspiration is so vast. And in that time, being able to extend ourselves into not just what we are seeing, but who we essentially are. It's quite the essence, right? Because it comes back to authenticity, I feel. Because when you can become who you want to be, whether that is in the moment, being able to just express your emotions as raw as possible in the safe space that you feel, whether that's a journal, whether that's a friend, family, but being able to actually own the experience of life that you're living, whether that feels happy, whether that feels sad, whether that feels exciting, whether that feels draining. So it's like, where can you be true to that experience of life that you're living while you're becoming someone? It might be in transition from one goal point to the other, and it might just be something that perhaps isn't something you ever thought of, and it's just going in a different shape or different direction than before, because there's always going to be a different stimuli that kind of comes in, shapes the shift of where you think you're going to where you actually start going. And sometimes that's fun and sometimes that's frustrating, but I think that's the essence of the journey we all are on, right? We're always like, oh, this didn't go the plan, but we can have a goal, and that's where we go. So in essence, it is about how do we become who we want to become, but it's in the whilst being able to sustain whatever that comes with. I think where I'm going with this is there's a certain rawness in dance like no one's watching. And I know I can say that because I am someone who genuinely loves dancing and who does dance like no one's watching. If I do want to make those reels, whether it's in the city that's bustling with people, or whether that's in the middle of a trek where I find a beautiful location, or sometimes when I was making a lot of dance reels, it was like, oh, Ria, are you going to get started here? And it was like anytime I see a beautiful location, I'm like, oh, I'm going to make a reel. And, it wouldn't even be like a planned. It's, oh, I feel like this song's nice, or this is trending. And sometimes I feel like I actually remember those moments because the improv ones are the ones that I'm like just enjoying and taking in the moment and just expressing myself. It's not necessarily something I've kept going with, but it was such a comfortable means of expression for me. So that meant that if I'm dressed up in a completely different outfit as well, and especially going to the city to record something, or especially going into a busy area to record something, I'm okay with people watching me. And I'm okay with dancing with a little bit of music that I can hear from my phone or from the speaker. And I think part of that journey for me was the fact that I'm okay with being who I am more than anything. It doesn't mean that I'm always happy with who I am, but I'm okay with being who I am. And I think Dance Like Nobody's Watching is essentially owning up to that space within yourself where you want to express something and you don't hold back based on the fact that you're being viewed, the fact that you have people's reactions coming to you, the fact that you have to please people. And I say that even though I can easily be someone who wants to adapt to someone's perspective, please that perspective as well. But at the same time, I think holding that ground of authenticity is a very important core value for me. And when I go back to being able to nurture that, I think I can only nurture it through experience. And we all have different value systems and belief systems which define where we stand and the foundation that we have in life in terms of what actually matters to us and how we actually approach the same action or the same thing that we do differently based on our own values and beliefs, and where we think things are going based on that. It definitely feels for me that authenticity and holding my ground and being true to the experience of life is a lot more important to me than being able to adapt to what everyone's experience of my life should feel like. I think that comes from a place of curiosity as well, because when you want to dance your own dance, you want to be able to experience where that journey takes you. You don't just, I don't know, if you can relate to dancing, you're not necessarily on a high throughout the dance, right? You have the music, you adapt to the music, you're vibing with the flow, the actual beats that come. And sometimes you miss one and sometimes pick them up perfectly. And sometimes you're just like, whoa, this made more sense in this one. And sometimes you're just like, I did the same thing 100 times, but this time it just feels way different. And I think that is the experience of life. Really, you can do the same thing one day and you feel, oh, this is great. You can do the same thing 5 years from now and you're like, oh, this is draining the soul out of me. And it's just about finding, okay, I'm evolving too. So what was interesting for me once might not be interesting for me now. And maybe I want to find something that fills my soul and lets it experience. I think cutting through that fluff, the essence is what actually makes you feel alive in a way. Only the positive emotions aren't the only ones that make us feel alive, right? Because if we are in the pursuit of something, if we are trying to either have goals, either have different experiences, either want to view life from a different lens, either ways, we're going to go through phases which are uncomfortable, which feel like, oh my God, what's happening? We don't stay the same in certain phases of our life because there'll be elements we'll be fighting within ourselves when we transition from one thing to the other. And isn't that what imposter syndrome is about as well? It works for most people. Fake it till you make it. It does work because you're priming your mind to be in the ideal state of who you want to become. So it does work. It's not that it doesn't work, but it's also like, how do you sift through that and shake that off as early as possible or as fast as possible so that even when you're doing something different, doing something new, and you're borrowing that courage and that confidence from the person you're becoming, that journey, that transition still feels okay. It still feels okay to be confused. It still feels okay to be not certain, to be maybe feeling anxious, feeling sad, feeling like it's overwhelming, feeling confused, feeling like what is happening. And I think those things also make up the whole puzzle, right? They also help our confidence because that's where we identify the gaps. Ideally, it is a state of lack that wants us to transition to a state of more. We always say, okay, this is my next goal. Say, for example, with salaries, right? Say, for example, we talk about salaries and you earn $10 and you go, hey, yeah, I can earn $10, woo. And then a few weeks later, you'd be like, okay, I want to earn 15 now. And you go and you try and find something that's worth that. And you keep leveling up and then you want the next and the next. And we're like that, not just with money, we're like that generally in life, right? If you're more introspective, you might be like, okay, I found my confidence in this, or I have clarity of thought in this area of life, but now I need to work on this area of life. And that's what makes things interesting, having different things to cut in different areas and having something to strive for, I think, in essence. But coming back to making that journey your own and owning who you're becoming, even the messiest, the rawest, the most like ridiculous version of yourself, and just being like, yep, I am dancing like no one's watching, because even if the world had eyes on me, I would still whinge about this and cry about this and figure this out, and or be determined about this or be motivated about this, because that's who I am. And that's true to the experience of who I'm becoming right now. I think that's where the essence of Dance Like No One's Watching comes for me. Online is a battlefield, right? Because you have concentrated opinions. It's something really interesting as well, because you can reach a lot more people and a lot more opinions at the same time, which is good because it expands your world and your thought process as well. But at the same time, it can come with a lot, or it can come with very little. And it's up to you as to how much you actually want to take on. But it does make you conscious at some point, right? If you don't own that journey, you start to feel like, is this really who I am? We operate digitally in a very niche, specific way, which works for the algorithm. It works for the comprehension of people in understanding who we actually are. But how does it matter if we push that? It's okay not to be a niche. It's okay to be many different things at once. It's okay to be becoming. I feel like we don't always have to arrive in how we are and who we are as a person and as we walk through life. And I feel like that's one thing. Arriving as who we are is not necessarily the goal of life. It's dancing to that and just being who we are in that process, because we might arrive at one destination to then be like, okay, I'm ready for the next and this and that. And it's not just in our goals, it's also who we are as people. And owning who you are in life has many different components, I think. Authenticity is a double-edged sword, because it kind of liberates you in being able to ground yourself to who you are. So the compass is very internal, but then everything around it changes so fast that being able to keep unlearning and relearning your new self-concept, I feel, is really tricky, especially when how fast life starts moving, and even sometimes when life is slower than we expect it to be. It is really hard to upgrade that sense of self constantly, and I feel that's what it comes down to. You can't own who you are, or you can't be authentic to who you are if you can't keep up with the different versions of your own self-concept. And that revolves and requires a lot of reflection. It requires a lot of understanding and comprehension and awareness, self-awareness. And sometimes it's just about having that clarity of thought that this is who I am and I know who I am and this is how I'm going to work from it and learn from it. And you might argue that, yes, like striving for that sustainability is what life is, right? A lot of it is that race of being able to strive for a comfortable life in different capacities and building that bandwidth to be able to sustain it. And so I think all of that works, right? Like the hustle of life, everything, all the actions, the striving, the becoming, all of that continues. It's just about how do you own yourself, or how do you be true to yourself in every journey that you take in life, whether that is something where you are being a little more optimistic than realistic, whether you are being more self-deprecating than self-respecting, whether you are being way more knowledgeable or egoistic than perhaps you're being grounded. Coming back to where we started, dancing like nobody's watching, I hope this conversation has resonated with you in owning the dance of life and dancing like nobody's watching. This is just the start of the journey, so please do support by following along, subscribing, and listening to this podcast. So please do reach out with your views, and until next time, subscribe, follow along. Thank you. Until next time.